All right, guys, let's talk about Texas A&M's Week 3 matchup versus Notre Dame. Today's video is going to be all about Notre Dame, scouting the team out, what the team was supposed to be going into the year, and what we learned in Week 1 versus Miami. Now, I want to preface everything we say by saying that game versus Miami was a Week 1. They had a bye week after it. Teams evolve greatly from Week 1 to Week 2, and certainly from Week 1 to Week 6, 7, and beyond. So what we saw in Week 1 will not be the Notre Dame that we see in Week 3 and beyond. I want to preface by saying that, but you still learn about personnel, you learn about the team, and you learn about what needs to be fixed. And I think we learned a lot about Notre Dame. It was a game that Notre Dame surprisingly struggled in a few areas, particularly up front. Offensive line had themselves a bad game, and that came by way of some experienced guys. Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner really struggled at the tackle positions against Miami's elite front seven. But there were some things that were really exciting too, like CJ Carr gaming and, making lemonade and running the offense really well and almost leading a comeback win against a very strong defense on the road in his first start of his career. So there was good and bad, as there is with any Week 1. I want to go through everything. I want to go through the stress points of the team, maybe the things that look really positive about this team going forward. A lot of that circled around CJ Carr. He had a great performance in Week 1. And maybe talk about areas that A&M might be able to target. I think there are a couple of question marks. I think this offensive line struggle, even against that Miami defense, was surprising. And I think the game plan that Mike Denbrock enacted against Miami was also surprising. Felt like maybe a lack of trust in that offensive line was there in Week 1. It will be interesting to see if that persists into Week 2. But guys, thanks for being here. Like and sub. This is the Notre Dame Scouting Report. Video that drops tomorrow is going to be all about the matchups. This is going to be my preview and prediction. We'll talk about A&M and Notre Dame and how those two teams connect and mesh and how they'll compete this coming Saturday. Notre Dame currently sits as a 6.5-point favorite at home, rebounding after that loss and bye week. But let's talk about that game, because as much as you see Notre Dame fans kind of upset or disappointed with the performance, a lot of things weren't great in that game. Notre Dame went out on the road in a tough opener versus Miami, got punched in the mouth early in the game and early in the second half, but still found themselves with a chance to tie or win the game late. I mean, it wasn't all bad, and I think Miami's a really good football team. I think they might have the best offense and defensive line trenches when you just kind of factor both in together in the country. I mean, that is a serious offensive line that can push guys around. That is a serious defensive line, especially serious defensive end room, that can really wreak havoc on running and passing plays alike. And Notre Dame was right there. It was a competitive loss. It wasn't a disaster, but maybe Miami exposed some weak spots in Notre Dame they're really going to have to address from Week 1 to Week 2. I think there was an underperformance in that, again, offensive line and defensive line fronts, especially when it comes to your starters on defensive line, maybe being a little bit soft in run defense, maybe a few tackling deficiencies from guys you wouldn't expect it from, like an Adon Schuler. Leonard Moore had some missed tackles. Guys that are really, really solid that you'll get better from, that just wasn't there in a Week 1, and sometimes that's just how Week 1s go. But the big positive, as we talked about at the top of the show, was CJ Carr. Promising debut for a redshirt freshman on the road. He was poised, he was composed, he had strong control over the entire game, he had a clutch run for a touchdown late in it to tie the game up, and I think that's the guy that they're going to be building around and excited for going forward into the season. He is the one great takeaway from this game, where maybe, you didn't get the running backs involved enough. Maybe you gave up a little bit more than expected at times in the secondary, especially early in the game. You were ran on a little bit more. The shining light is CJ Carr in this game, and that is something that they're very excited to bring back home, without dealing with that crowd noise, without dealing with the silent count maybe, and be able to slow things down and really take this thing by the horns versus A&M in Week 3. So A&M will have the work cut out for them with a quarterback who I think got a lot of comfort in this game. And I think that was part of the game plan. A lot of passes at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage or within 10 yards for CJ Carr, especially early in this game. They force-fed the passing attack. Screens, quick hitters, RPOs. That was the game plan early. To a lot of Notre Dame fans' displeasure, because in doing so, in making those RPOs, in allowing for the read of the pass instead of the run, and just fading the running game early, Love only had 10 carries in the game. Jadarian Price only had 6 carries in the game. And, I don't necessarily know what the thought purely was about that. I would assume they wanted to get the quarterback worked into this game earlier rather than have to pass a lot later. At least he gets those under his belt early in his first action. Maybe they just wanted to test a new look Miami secondary, and maybe they thought that was their path to winning this game because Miami has a really, really strong front seven. Maybe like, okay, we're not going to run against this team. let's use these new weapons. Let's use Malachi Fields. Let's use Jordan Faison. Let's use Greathouse in this passing attack and see if we can just attack this team this way, because we know CJ Carr can make these plays, and we think that our receivers can maybe make lemonade. And while Faison was good early in the game, I think some of the stuff we saw early wasn't there late, and they really didn't have a downfield passing game until very late in the game. A really clutch pass to Raridan. That was a busted coverage by defense, to be fair, but then a really, really strong ball and catch by Malachi Fields, the transfer who's going to make a big impact on the season at the receiver position. Big-bodied, strong-handed, gets open. I don't know if he's a speed burner, but he's a guy that can make contested grabs down the field. And by reports, coming from fall camp, looking at that spring game, CJ Carr is a deep ball. CJ Carr can place the ball in that second and third level really, really nicely. The offensive line didn't give him time to do so in the game, and I also think that was part of the plan for enacting that really short game-oriented passing attack. Every time they dropped back, not every time, but a majority of the times CJ Carr dropped back to pass, Miami was getting through, and they didn't have to blitz to do it. Blitzes got through, guys got beat, tackles got beat. Redshirt freshman right guard got beat. Charles Jagasaw still not playing, still recovering from an offseason accident. And the drop back passing game suffered from that. And, I don't think A&M will be as rigid as Miami is front seven in stopping the run, but I think A&M can be as good or better at rushing the passer than Miami. And I don't think Miami blitzed a particularly high amount of times in this game. Mike Elko will get very creative with his blitzes, get very creative when he shows blitzes and doesn't bring them. And I think that's going to be another puzzle for CJ Carr and this offensive line to solve in the game. Now, we're not doing matchups right now, but just kind of talking about the stress points in this team, this offensive line has to be better because they were not good enough to allow for a consistent drop-back passing game versus Miami. Running backs, we saw their talent. I'm so surprised they didn't go back to them in the mid-portion of this game. You understand early, you have your script, you have your game plan, work the young quarterback in. Late in the game, you're working from behind. You'd rather pass, so you have a chance to stop the clock more often with either first downs or incompletions. They faded the running game. In the mid-portion of the game, that was a huge surprise, especially when you saw how successful Jadarian Price was running the football. And even Jeremiah Love, who only averaged 3.3 yards per carry, he was still making lemonade. You could still see the talent on full display for Jeremiah Love. Now, what I think they're going to be doing a lot going forward is some short game to Love, to Price, where I think A&M can maybe struggle. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. But rounding out this offensive unit, the thing that was really surprising was them going back to the quarterback run game in short yard scenarios. Because this year, without Riley Leonard, I think me and many anticipated that this was going to be the Jeremiah Love show. This was going to be him, this offensive line, biting down on those chin straps, getting the short yard stuff. Last year, that was all Riley Leonard. And while Carr is mobile, he's not a veteran. He hasn't been in the college weight room as long as Riley Leonard was, and he's not the mobile quarterback that Riley Leonard was. But they went to it time and time again. Maybe that's to get an extra blocker. Maybe that's to help the offensive line out. Maybe that's just to kind of catch defenses off guard. They went to it a lot in the game. And while it did pop a couple times, it got stuffed more than it popped. So I would expect that versus A&M in a week 3, A&M showed some weaknesses in the run game for a half and a play in week 1, and that was by way of a lot of, gap fit mistakes and edge contain mistakes. I would bet we get a heavy dose of Love and Price this game. I bet they write that wrong. They're at least going to knock on that door. I bet those scripted plays will give you a heavy, heavy dose because A&M's been pretty strong at the secondary, at least for the short game and in bottling up screens and quick hitters through 2 weeks. I really like A&M's tandem at corner and nickel against this unit, and I think A&M will show a lot of man coverage against this receiver look, and I think they're going to try to run the ball quite a bit. But we'll see how much A&M can afford to sell out for that run. I think they'll sell out for it quite a bit, more so than even Miami did. Miami just leaning on that heavy and fierce defensive line and linebacker core. Let's move over to the defense. And I think going into the year, the 2 stress points when I'm looking at Notre Dame was defensive tackle and the safety spot next to Adon Schuler. And let's start with the defensive line. They got pushed around quite a bit early in the game. I don't think they were as rigid in run stop as they wanted to be when they had their starters on the field. I thought guys like Donovan Heinisch and Jason Onye really struggled to anchor the interior of this defense early. But when they put in Rubio and Dawson, the transfer, I think they did a lot better. Those are bigger guys. Those are more run stop oriented bodies. And I think that showed, and they were able to kind of bottle up the running attack when they had guys like that in. But Heinisch is 277 pounds. Onye is 302, but he's 6'5". That's a lighter unit. That's a longer unit when you're looking at Onye. and Miami was able to really move bodies when those two guys were out there. Now, I think where they had their best run stop was from the edge, from the linebacker core. I thought Boubacar Traore, as anticipated, was really, really good in the game. Probably the star of this defense in the game. He was the most disruptive player rushing the quarterback. He was, disruptive in the running game. And I thought Viamu Asu was really, really strong in the game, coming from that linebacker position. Does a lot for the defense. They line him up on the edge a lot, but he was impactful in the running game. As a lighter linebacker, as a guy who looks like a pass rusher, he can just do so much for your defense. I expect a heavy dose of him. Drake Bowen, their tenured middle linebacker, who should be the quarterback of this defense, struggled a little bit in the game. Obviously, when you're replacing Jack Kaiser, there's going to be an adjustment there. That's a guy with all the experience in the world, 70 career starts. But I thought there was a lot of ground to gain early in this game in run stop. I think pass rush came late. I thought pass rush was there when they needed it, and even when there was a pass rush, a quarterback like Carson Beck was able to make lemonade. Like that late first half miraculous touchdown grab to CJ Daniels. I mean, that was a play that Notre Dame could have intercepted or even gotten a sack on. That was a better play by the offense. I'm pointing out some negatives for this Notre Dame defense, right? I think they just got punched in the mouth early, and I think they adjusted really well. I think they really shut down this Miami attack late in the game. They gave themselves a chance to get back into it. They gave this offense a bunch of tries. Notre Dame was down, I think, 21-7 late in this game. They had a 3-and-out. And the game felt like it was going to be over. But then this defense just steps up, gets stops, and Notre Dame's right there in the game with a chance to win it late. Sloppy tackling in the opener. I don't anticipate that to continue. I think this linebacker crew is as good as it gets in the country. We talked about Viamu Asu. We talked about Bowen. I think Sneed is a versatile guy who's maybe a little bit underutilized in the game. I think we'll see him a lot more going forward. I really, really like this linebacker group. And I really, really like, I think his name is Stroman. He transferred in to play safety alongside Adon Schuler, and I thought he was one of the better players on this Notre Dame defense this game, and he's a guy you're going to see a heavy, heavy dose of. I think Notre Dame really struggled when they went to some of the bench players. I think Luke Tolich and Carson Hobbs kind of struggled against that Miami passing attack, and I think one of their best passing drives was against that duo at slot corner in Hobbs and safety with Tolich. And those guys kind of got lost in coverage a little bit. Receivers were able to get more separation against those two. But when Stroman and Devontae Smith were out there, the other nickel and the other safety, I think that's when they were at their best, and I think we'll see a heavy, heavy dose of that. And a lot of week one is just learning your personnel, learning your go-to guys in the crunch of a game, who you want out there on the field. And I just think we're going to see a lot of Stroman and Devontae Smith going forward, because I thought those guys were solid, especially Stroman, man. He might be, as good as any. He might make that safety duo as good as any in the country when you pair him with Adon Schuler, and guys just will play a lot better after a week one. So coming out of this game, it was a tough opener for Notre Dame, but that was a tough opener on the road with a redshirt freshman quarterback who played well, but I think in large dictated the Notre Dame game plan, and maybe that game plan led to some shortcomings offensively. Maybe not as much aggression rushing the passer with Notre Dame's defense. I think we'll see that adjustment in week two, or week three in this case. I think we're going to see them run a lot more blitzes. Chris Ash in his first game, calling this defense. He's blitzed a lot more in his career than he did versus Miami. I think we'll see them try to get to Marcel Reed a bit more. Marcel Reed able to evade pressure, but not as good of a passer when blitzed. And I just think we'll see a lot more heavy dose of running as well in this game. And I think they'll really kind of shake out their rotations and prioritize certain guys after what they've learned in week one. Similar opposition. Again, I think Miami is a much heavier, bulkier defensive line outfit, but I think A&M is strong in the interior, bulky and big there, but maybe not as big at defensive end, better pass rush unit. But I think they're going to really try to run at that thing and see if A&M can run fit well enough to stop it. So guys, give me your thoughts on Notre Dame going into this game. Tomorrow, I'm going to preview the game. This is just your overview of the Notre Dame team and what to expect from them. Let's see how A&M handles it. We'll talk all about that more in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching, and gig 'em.